Hi everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to the A&S Housing webinar. My name's Adam Spurr and I run the business applications practice here at A&S. I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Henry of Salix Homes today for this session, who's going to be talking a little bit about their journey to the cloud and using Dynamics for customer management, complaints and repairs. I don't know whether we've got, have we got Lyndon on today as well? I just wanted to introduce a couple of people to you if they were on. So Lyndon looks after our housing customers in the north, and Harry Stainton looks after our housing customers in the south, for those who were wondering. So the agenda today is very simple and not complicated at all. I'm going to do a quick 2 minutes on who A&S are and where we are in housing. Then I'm going to hand over to Chris from Salix, and then we'll have some time for questions afterwards. So if you want to ask some questions, either put them in the chat and I can respond to them fairly quickly, or put your hand up, or wait till the end. There's plenty of time for questions at that point. We'll see how we get on. So housing is a huge growth sector for Microsoft and also for Dynamics. As we know, in stock, there's something like 5 million homes across the UK, representing about a sixth of all the properties, and just over 1,500 housing associations of varying size. We're proud that we have about 18 of these housing providers. We're fortunate to have 18 as customers, some of the bigger ones and some of the mid-market ones, and this is growing for us all of the time. For those that don't know a little bit about A&S, first of all, thank you for joining. Secondly, 3 things I'll share with you. We're 300 people across Manchester and London, founded in 1996, and we have a 50-50 split of private and public sector customers. This year, one of our achievements is we're incredibly proud to be the Microsoft UK Partner of the Year finalist and the top Dynamics partner in those top 3. So that's brought us a fantastic recognition from Microsoft, but also they're pushing us more and more into this housing sector. So what do we do? Really, we focus on 3 main areas. A&S are trying to help customers get into the cloud, trying to help our customers move to the cloud and then into cloud-based business applications, and then also helping them deal with and make sense of data. So trying to turn data into information, information into knowledge, and knowledge into wisdom. So those are the few things that we do. Told you it'd be 2 minutes. So I wanted to introduce quickly Chris. And Chris, thank you very much for joining us today. Chris has worked at Salix for over 10 years in a variety of technology roles, from IT service delivery to IT project management, and has more recently been leading the transformation of Salix's infrastructure into the Microsoft Azure public cloud, along with implementing Microsoft Dynamics as their core customer relationship management. Really excited and looking forward to this session. Asked Chris to do a few slides at the beginning before we get onto the questions. I asked him if he could share some background on Salix, some of the challenges that they were facing, where are they now, and where are they going. So, Chris, I'm hoping you can see my slides.
Yeah, just bear with me. Yeah, I've got them up.
Well, your slides, and I'm happy to try for you. So, thanks a lot for joining us. We're probably going to do about 20 minutes, Chris.
Yeah, that should be fine. Should be able to do that. Hopefully I can talk for that long.
Well, if not, I've got some questions.
No props. So thank you very much for the introduction there, Adam. As Adam said, I'm Chris Henry, so I'm the head of IT at Salix Homes. Today I'm going to talk to you a little about some of the challenges we faced pre-Dynamics and some of the things we're now doing, which Dynamics has helped us to improve. I've incorporated a little bit around the cloud adoption side as well, because I know that's something people are interested in as well. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of Salix Homes. If you could just switch to the next slide. Thank you, Adam. You might have to click it twice as well. Thank you. So Salix Homes are an multi-award-winning social housing provider based in Salford, Greater Manchester. We manage around 8,500 properties, predominantly in a very centralised area of Salford. So we're quite a small sort of square metre footage sort of thing. We began our journey in 2007. So we launched as an Almo. So we were originally broken down from two previous Almos, and one of the pushes around that was there was a previous Almo called New Prospect, and in the old rating system that the audit commission did, not the audit commission, sorry, basically some of the problems that arose from quite a big organisation. So it was about an organisation about 25,000 properties at the time across Salford, and some problems were highlighted with some of the assessments there. So it was broken down into multi-parts. So it's broken down into two separate Almos, one of which was Salix. So we knew we had quite a lot of work to do. So over the years, we grew that brand quite significantly. We got some really good scores then on the audit side as a new organisation. And since 2015, we've now been an independent organisation in our own right. So we stock transferred away from the council at that point. One of the things that obviously we had quite a lot of commitments in that stock transfer that we had to provide. But as the world changes, we started to think about, how does housing change? How can we change and provide our housing services, and accommodate them for the future and the sort of forward thinking and the sort of consumerization really of services. So about 2 years ago, we launched our strategy to rethink housing. So at that point, two of the major things within that rethinking housing were a move to the cloud and a move to Dynamics 365. So they formed part of that journey. So if you can flick across the next slide, please, Anne. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so soon after becoming an independent organisation in our own right, as I said, we set to transform our IT infrastructure. This was one of the most ambitious changes we've ever done within our organisation, and it was the first time we'd sort of gone it alone on the infrastructure side. Previously, that was provided by the council, of which we were a wholly owned subsidiary of. So we spent many weeks and months looking at the market, looking at options that were available to us, and looking at the future direction of technology as well. We looked at the pros and cons of public cloud. We looked at private cloud. We looked at building a data center of our own. And we really decided that public cloud was the right move for us. At the time, there'd been a huge shift in the market, not necessarily in housing, but more widely in terms of cloud adoption. And many of the concerns about cloud had been addressed. So we looked at lots of organizations probably outside of the sector. So we looked at things like the financial institutions, government agencies, even the Ministry of Defence. And we looked at some of the challenges that have been raised around cloud, around security, around resilience, things like that. And we felt that there weren't really any barriers for us anymore. We felt that these kind of concerns had been addressed. We also felt we were in a really good position, that our application estate didn't really present any major barriers or obstacles to moving to the cloud. There were obviously challenges, of course, but we believe we could overcome them when we looked at them. Our infrastructure had previously been provided by the council, as I said. That meant we didn't really have any hardware or licensing assets that we needed to burn. So there wasn't really that financial impetus to keep anything that we already had. So it meant we were in a really good position to transition from our perspective. So we did that transition. We went through a full OG procurement exercise, supported by partners, and that was really successful. We went down the cloud route. ANS were our managed service provider of choice, and we used 4Net from the telephony side as well. So we've gone down an in-house contact center route, and an Avaya PBX platform. We did look at Skype for Business at that point, as our PBX. Turned out it would have been rather expensive to run it in that environment. Obviously, things have changed now with Teams, so that is something we'll probably look at within the next couple of years. Do we potentially transition fully to Teams being our PBX platform? Because we felt that the telephony side, the requirements we had were centrally and primarily in the contact center. So that's where we really needed to focus in terms of an application, and Enghouse really met some of those needs for us. We've now been running fully in the cloud for about 18 months. It's been a really great success. There's been some challenges, obviously, but overall it's liberated us as a team to support the organisation to deliver on the ambitions that they have, which are quite big. We like a lot of change at Salix. We don't tend to sit still for very long, and I think IT's really become an enabler now. We're at that board level now in terms of decision making, whereas I think previously we may not have been, and we may have maybe seen as a bit of a challenge. Whereas now we're able to deliver on some of those really big ambitions that the organisation have. We still have some work to do to make some of our legacy applications truly cloud native, but the applications are still running perfectly well within the cloud environment at the moment, even if they aren't necessarily harnessing some of the capabilities of native cloud applications at present, but we're working on that at the moment. Oh, sorry, Adam, knocked my laptop in. If you can switch to the next slide, that would be useful. Thank you. Okay, so we had a number of challenges before Dynamics 365, and this sort of gave us the impetus to look at Dynamics 365 as part of this rethinking housing strategy and as part of this fundamental shift in our technology landscape, really, at Salix. So some of the issues we experienced were we had lots of disparate systems. So we had lots of systems that had very specific uses, very niche uses for very specific processes within the organization. The systems weren't necessarily bad, not necessarily bad systems. Some of them were very effective at what they did. I'm sure many of you use these same systems at the moment. And sometimes the challenge was that those systems, were well loved within the teams that they were used in. The issue was that there was a proliferation of systems, and those systems then didn't necessarily talk to each other. So that's one of the challenges we had around integration. We didn't really have a centralized record of all customer interactions. So there would be lots of customer interactions that were missed or that a very specific team would know about, but the rest of the organization didn't. So that meant we had a lot of crossovers in terms of work. We had a lot of first time issues where somebody may have contacted about something, called back, fairly soon afterwards, and we wouldn't necessarily know that interaction had taken place. So that was one of the key drivers for us, was to get that centralized customer record and to understand all of those customer interactions, which would then in turn provide a better customer service for the end customer. The processes weren't consistent either, so you would get very different consistencies of approach from different teams and staff, which then results in inconsistencies in our approach to customers. An example of this is where we would handle complaints, or this may have then escalated into complaints previously. So again, that was something we really needed to focus on. We needed to streamline that, so the service that we were offering to the customers was exactly the same, regardless of who they contacted within the organization. One of the integral things we did around that was we centralized our entire incoming telephony traffic. So everything was centralized and sent to our customer contact center as that first point of contact. That allowed us to streamline those interactions and present that sort of single face of Salix, so to speak. There was a lack of, as I mentioned before, meaningful integration between the key systems. So many of the key systems didn't have substantial enough integrations between them, which again made it very difficult to have one version of the truth. Again, it made it very, very difficult because one team might have known about something, but another team didn't, because they only used one of the systems or they only used a couple of the systems. So that was a big issue for us as well in terms of that system integration. We had tried to integrate those systems as much as possible, but it wasn't always possible based on what the supplier was offering in terms of the openness of the APIs. So that was one of the big challenges for us as well. The misdiagnostics on repair records. So we would have quite a lot of inconsistency with diagnostics on repairs, both from the customer side and from the internal staff side. That meant that when the operatives were turning up at the properties, they would be turning up to fix something that wasn't necessarily the problem. So that obviously results in second visits, not having the tools available, not having the parts available to repair that. So we had quite a lot of complexity there around the repairs process that we needed to streamline. We did have a repairs diagnostic tool at the time, which was fine for the standard repairs. But when it became to more complex repairs, where there was a lot more detail, a lot more questions needed to be asked, we felt that it just wasn't sufficient to help us on that journey. We did speak to some legacy application providers at the time about CRM. Some of them had overlays of Microsoft Dynamics within their systems, but in our opinion, they were quite poor. They had a lot of integration issues because, again, they were trying to integrate those products together, while sort of still retaining the core system, really. So we felt that the heart wasn't necessarily in it. We did look at some other options. We looked at Salesforce. We looked at Documotive at the time, which are now Castleton, which are now in turn MRI, I believe. But again, we just felt that Microsoft was a lot better offering, and it seemed to be a lot more customizable. We felt it would really allow us to tailor it to our needs. And Microsoft had really seemed to be focusing on housing even then. They seemed to be really pushing that housing market and that housing agenda. And it helps with Microsoft as well. You know, the weight of Microsoft behind it and the proven track record helped us to assure our senior leadership team and board that this was the right direction to take, that, you know, we'd have a strong foundation to build this key system on. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. I've inserted another slide, so my apologies, Adam, because I didn't provide this to you. So I'll just go through it without the slide, not a problem. So one of the things I decided to add a bit about was bringing staff on the journey, because originally we just looked at the challenges and then sort of the successes now, but I realised that people probably wanted to hear a bit about some of the challenges on bringing the staff along on that journey, because it wasn't always easy. Many staff had grown really accustomed to some of the systems and processes that they'd used previously. As I said, some of these systems were good at the niche process that they were delivering, and people had used them for a number of years and they'd become very attached to them. As part of that journey, we had to really emphasize the positives and the time savings that bringing it into Dynamics, into a centralized system, would bring. Often the benefits of streamlining weren't always necessarily visible to the person that starts the input process. The streamlining, the benefit may come further down the line. So it was about getting the business users to understand that where they would maybe do the exact same thing but in a different system, it would improve the process further down the line. It would improve it for other teams, and to start thinking about the bigger picture. It's not just the single part of that process, it's the entire process and the end goal and the delivery of that service to the customer that would improve. It wouldn't necessarily always make it faster on the initial input, but it would be better streamlined throughout the entire process. So that was one of the challenges we really had, was that some people sort of said, well, hang on, my bit's exactly the same. It doesn't feel like I'm seeing any difference. So it was about showing them that full journey of that process and how that would impact other teams and improve processes for other teams further down the line, which was really successful. We always saw this project as well as a business-led project. The business made the decision. They'd made the decision that they wanted a CRM system. They came on the journey and decided they wanted Dynamics with us. It wasn't really an IT push project. You know, IT was there as a deliverer, based on the technology that was available. Were the enabler, were not the lead on this particular project. And I think that was one of the really important things we had as part of this process. We would generally only overwrite a business decision as well, where there was a significant technological reason or technological challenge to do so. We would generally try to accommodate their position as much as we could. We thought that was really important to gain that buy-in as well. Often we would find a balance between those two positions as well, which was really helpful. We would look at the pros and cons of different solutions, and then agree collectively on a way forward. Was the main sort of push. An example of this, for instance, with the SharePoint integration, so two Microsoft products talking to each other, Microsoft has a very standard way of those products integrating together, Dynamics and SharePoint. The solution the business wanted to go for was very heavily customized. And one of the challenges we presented was that this would potentially create issues in the future as we moved and changed those systems, or as Microsoft changes the way those integrations works. So eventually we decided on a sort of halfway house. So we went with Microsoft's recommended solution with a little bit of customization to bring them along that journey. And again, this has proven time and time again to be the right decision. We try our very best to go with the vanilla product as much as possible, because we find that makes it a lot more straightforward when it comes to upgrades and things like that. And something I'll move on to in the future around Microsoft changing the user interface, that has made that journey a lot more easily navigable, so to speak. We have found that where we've introduced a lot of complexity, where we've overbuilt or overthought processes, that's where we tend to have challenges. So we've really tried to streamline those processes as much as possible and look at really what we're trying to focus on, the end goal. What's the data we're trying to get out of the system, or what is the process we're trying to achieve, rather than trying to rebuild something that we may have done for 10 years that wasn't very streamlined. So that's something we really focused on. Sorry, bear with me. So we also invested heavily in the time and resources to train staff. So it was very important, especially with the customer contact center, that they were given time to really learn this system. Now, that's very difficult if they're trying to do a day-to-day job as well. So we made sure that we created as much time as possible for them to really take themselves out of that situation, really get involved in the project, and really learn that system inside out and learn those processes inside out. And that's a massive investment in time and resource for the organization. So that's something we were really happy that the senior leadership and the board really supported that. And then that has to be a continuous training process as well. So that needs to be continuous in terms of new starters coming into the organization, and also to reinforce that message with people that have been in the organization for a while, as well as new processes and changes are brought on board. We took quite an agile approach as well to the development of the system. We did use some waterfall controls as well, just to give the board and leadership team the reassurance and to prevent scope creep, because the problem with agile is obviously because it's constantly changing, potentially you will have an issue where there is scope creep within that project, which we don't necessarily want. So it was about, the way we did it was we had the users sat with the developers directly, so they would work through the problems and work through the solutions that they wanted to achieve, and that meant that they were getting almost real-time feedback. They were able to visibly see that vision taking place and shaping that vision with the development team, rather than that sort of traditional write out your requirements, send it to the developers, they come back a month later and you decide that's not what you wanted. So that was a really good approach for us. We had to make sure we obviously didn't end up with that scope creep. So that was one of the things we really tried to focus on, and also to give that reassurance as well to the leadership team and the project teams. Okay, thanks, Adam. Okay, so where we are now with Dynamics 365, so it's completely revolutionized the way we interact with our customers. So we've completely transformed our repair service to meet customer expectations in a consumer world. So one of the challenges we had was that customers expected this sort of Amazon style delivery system. Now we know we've not got Amazon's budget, unfortunately, but we knew that we could certainly improve that process around communication. So again, when customers now raise a repair, they get repairs appointment text messages. Those text messages contain a link to an organization called Glimpse, and Glimpse basically gives them tracking information on that repair. So it tells them which operative's about to turn up to the property, when the operative sets off to the property, what time they'll arrive, estimated time of arrival, that kind of thing. So it gives them that very, very Amazon-esque type delivery scenario, which is really, really important. And customers have fed back that that's really, really important to them, because it feels like, they're getting that high level of service. We now gain consistent repairs diagnostics. We've introduced a chatbot facility, so this is within the Dynamics environment. So we use that both internally to our staff and externally to customers. We always felt like it was an integral part of using the chatbot was internally. So we started off using it internally, and the reason for that was so that we could ensure the customer experience was sound. We could ensure that the repairs were being diagnosed correctly. We could see some of the challenges that customers may have interacted with and may have experienced whilst using the chatbot. And it's worked so well internally that now all of our repairs internally are still raised via the chatbot as well as to customers. And it's really good because it means we can identify those diagnostic issues in terms of the audit logs. We're able to the operatives are able to flag up that was a misdiagnosis, and then we can go back and backtrack on how that was diagnosed and put steps in place to address that misdiagnostic, and maybe ask more detailed questions on specific repairs to get to the root and the heart of the problem. We are able to capture other information as well within the chatbot. So another example was around COVID-19 and the lockdown. So we were able to implement very quickly some scripting within the chatbot that would ask for symptoms of COVID, and then from that we're then able to create an alert, and that alert goes across to our health and safety team and our repairs operations team if they meet any of the conditions that maybe would flag up that they may be experiencing COVID symptoms. So that's been really useful again for capturing that information at the first point of contact. Just having a quick look at notes.
Let me ask you a quick question there. Let me ask you a quick question there, Chris. So the top three things. I always like things in threes. My brain works in that way. What do you think the top three things are that you would say that have been the big benefits that you've got? Is it the one version of the truth?
One version of the truth, yeah. One version of the truth is one of the big ones. The repairs process is one of the big ones, and probably the customer portal as well, because we did have a customer portal, but it just wasn't up to scratch. It was very one-way transactions, so they would log something, hear nothing else about it until the end point when we contacted them. Whereas now that process is taken all the way through very smoothly, and they're able to get updates throughout the duration of that process until the end result, really. So that's been a massive change for us as well.
And the one version of the truth, I'm told that's the nirvana that people want to get to all the time. What's it meant to you?
So it as I said, so one of the challenges we've had in the past was that just the disparate systems and not having all of those customer interactions in one place. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say we've got it completely right, but I will sit here and say we know what customers are contacting us about, and we know about all the interactions because they're all coming through a central place. So that really lets us understand where that demand is and what the demand is. One of the things we noticed immediately was the amount of payment calls that we were getting. So these were just calls where they were ringing up to pay the rent, essentially. Now we had tools in place, we had websites, we had, you know, payment card offerings, we had all sorts of things that people could go and transact themselves, a self-serve transaction, but they still felt it necessary to ring us immediately and pay that way. So again, we've put steps in place to try to capture them very early in that process where they self-serve, so they're still ringing, but they're ringing an automated payment system, or they're transferred to an automated payment system for them to then enter that payment information. And again, we wouldn't have necessarily known that. You may have heard it anecdotally, but the figures wasn't there because they were contacting various different teams. Whereas now we're very able to see those kind of challenges and say, right, we need to address that.
And from a customer perspective, what do you think your customers are thinking about all this stuff that you've been doing?
So we felt it was really necessary to bring them on that journey. So we set up some customer panels around the customer portal and the chatbot, and those customer panels basically started to test and look at these products very early, and they helped to shape how those products looked, how the user experience was, how the chatbot was, how was it engaging with a non-human. So some of the things that, you know, were really important was that they said they wanted to feel like it wasn't a human. So they wanted to know it wasn't a human. They didn't want us to pretend to be a human. That was a very important thing. and they are able to escalate it to a human as well. So if they get frustrated with the process, or they just really just want to speak to a human because it's quite a complex problem, they're able to escalate that fairly quickly, and that will take it across to web chat within our contact center, and we're able to interact with them directly. And the same with the customer portal. You know, they picked the colours, so we've sort of moved away from the sort of vibrant green branding of Salix, and we've gone for a sort of nuanced pastel shade of purple. But again, it was based on feedback from customers that they wanted something that looked quite minimalist. They didn't want something that was quite garish. So it was really interesting. Yeah, some of the feedback we got, and some of the things we just wouldn't necessarily have thought about. So the text messages were a prime example. We did some text messages recently around repairs appointments with the lockdown, and we used the customer panel for that. And what we found is we were very much saying, we'll send somebody a text message, they'll text us back. And it didn't even factor into our thinking at the time that actually some people just wouldn't have the ability to text us back. They may not have credit on the phone. It may just cause some kind of anxiety, and they'd ring us. So we learned lots of lessons like that from our customer panel as well, that we just wouldn't know. We wouldn't think, because we're probably in our own little bubble really some of the time, and we say, you know, that'd work really well, and then in hindsight it really doesn't. So we do a lot of learning around that customer experience as well.
So before we get on to the future, just I'm interested in, you know, a couple of points from you on, you know, other housing associations that are in the same position or going on the same journey. What couple of bits of advice would you give to them?
Really think about it. I think one of the things is, for us, we really jumped into it, and I think if we'd have sat back, we'd have maybe thought about some things a bit longer, and thought about how we did things. We've probably gone back and fixed some bits we could have probably fixed early on, and I think there's that. It's reining that in. So if you're going to go for a sort of agile approach, it's great for the feedback, but obviously we need to make sure there's not that scope creep. And I think sometimes it maybe felt like we allowed too many changes right up until the end. So I would definitely say rein that in as much as you can, because it does create problems potentially. And I think just one of those things as well, go for it. I think you only know when you go ahead and do these things, and some of these processes have been in place for so long, I don't think anybody would have challenged them. But when we actually sat down and thought about it, and people started to ask questions, you know, why are you doing this, and why do we do that, and why is that in place? Oh, that's there because we once did something 10 years ago around that. And it's like, well, you know, that's an exception. That shouldn't even be factored into the main process. That should be dealt with as an exception, really. And there was quite a lot of that, where we built processes about really complex things that happen once every millennium. And it was really interesting to see that. And I don't think anybody truly realizes until you sit down and you map that process out, that those kind of things are there, you know, based on feedback someone gave a few years back. So it's really interesting.
So final question before you get to the future. So everybody's sitting there, right? How do I build a business case to get this done? So just talk us through a little bit, if you could, some pointers on you know, what was your thinking about building a business case to take to the stakeholders to persuade them that this was a change that needed to happen for the future?
I think, yeah, so it's about data, it's about understanding. You need to really understand what your application portfolio looks like, what some of the challenges are. So we spent a lot of time speaking to the individual services, asking them what the challenges were, asking them what the problems were, trying to identify the friction between services was really important. So people don't necessarily like to say, oh, I've got friction with this person over here, it's not in my team. But that was something we really focused on. You know, how those teams worked with each other and how processes move between systems and between services, because we felt that's where the most traction came, most friction came. And that was where we would gain the most traction in terms of resolving those problems. So that was something we really focused on. The other thing was involve the services directly in it. So take them on the visits, take them to look at other systems, take them to demonstrations, really get them on board with thinking about it that way, and really try to get your senior leadership team on board as well. Some of our senior leadership team were involved right through the processes. They were involved, with the Dynamics procurement itself. They were involved even with the IT procurement of the cloud. Obviously, they don't necessarily understand the technicalities, but we really involved them in what they were hoping they would get out of the back of it. And we felt that was really important. So when we then pulled it into a business case, the senior leadership team could understand that it was a drive from the entire business. It was really the entire business wanting to push this agenda. It wasn't an IT system per se. It was a change in culture, so to speak. So that was something that we really focused on, and then nailing the cost down as well. Get really tight with the costs. Really understand where those costs are going to come in, because it does cost money. It's not free. But really understanding that cost to benefit ratio is really important. And looking at how you reduce those licenses on those other systems. I mean, we still have a housing system, but we're very much using it for a very niche core engine for the arrears management and the rent accounting. We're really not using it outside of that. And it's really interesting. We've really narrowed some of those systems down. We've been able to get rid of some systems completely. And that's where your benefit comes in. You're realizing the potential, the costs are there, but you're releasing those costs from other systems as well.
So we've got a couple of questions coming in. I'll just let you do the quick minute on the future, and then we'll move over to the questions.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry, I keep knocking my laptop as well. I got it set up really badly, I think, on the desk. So my apologies if I keep shaking. So yeah, in terms of the future, there's lots for us that we're still thinking about. I've sort of half referenced some of it already. So field service is probably the big one for us. So when we initially looked at our repair service and how we improve it, we did look at field service. We thought, what if? Can we move to field service? Can we remove this legacy sort of repair system that most housing associations have? Do we get rid of it and go whole hog towards Microsoft with field service? Now, we really thought about it. It was something that was really at the forefront of our mind. At the time, we felt it just wasn't quite there. Some of the complexities within the housing repair service, we felt field service just wasn't quite there. However, I've looked at it more recently in the last few months, and it's massively changed and massively improved from where it was. And we're genuinely looking at that as a potential future replacement now. I've seen some really interesting demonstrations from Microsoft around HoloLens and how that works in conjunction with field service and Dynamics Remote Assist. I mean, some of this, it almost seems sci-fi stuff, but it's stuff that Microsoft are really doing right now. So that's something we're really interested in. The expansion of the chatbot. So as the chatbot's working so well for the repairs diagnostics, we're really pushing now on expanding that to other services. So where that's the central point of interaction from customers on the portal for all queries, essentially. But we've also seen potentially we can use that internally as well for staff. So HR queries, payroll queries, changing of address, changing of bank details. We're thinking we could pretty much handle a lot of this with chatbots and reduce that overburden on the services as well. And then, as I mentioned, rent accounting and arrears escalation, we've again something we're really looking at. We haven't seen anybody do it well in Dynamics yet, but we're really something we're really pushing, because that would really free us away from the housing system entirely. That's what we're still relying on that housing system for at the moment. So if we ever can do it, we will. So it's something we regularly look at. And then, as I said, the sort of, there's the low code as well, the low code power platform stuff. So again, Microsoft are investing heavily on this democratization of IT, and this giving users the ability to start building out these systems themselves, and to start getting really involved in the build and design of these services and processes. We see it as a real plus. We don't see it as getting rid of our development team. We see that development team can move on to the more complex things, whilst the business are able to self-serve on this kind of low code power platform build, really. But it's something that's sort of in the early stages within our organization, but we are looking at it. It's something that we're really looking at. I think it was interesting, I think at a Microsoft event, I think back in the last year, it was interesting that Satya Nadella brought up, I think he was a security guard from Heathrow that had built an app on Power Platform, a low-code app. And again, it just shows that Microsoft's very committed to this kind of democratization of IT.
Don't forget your security and governance, though, Chris.
Security and go, yeah, well, that's the big
everybody
challenge.
going off building power apps left, right, and
Yeah,
centre.
yeah, that's the big challenge. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there has to still be governance. I totally agree with you, and I think we would certainly see it used in quite like small scenarios. So where somebody's got a paper-based process or someone's running something on a spreadsheet, that's certainly very much something that you could start picking up via this low code scenario. But as you say, make sure you keep an eye on it, because otherwise you could have 20, 30 systems.
We've got a few minutes left, so let's jump to
sorry.
a couple of the questions. So we've had two of the same questions, one from Ian and one from Mikhail. They're interested in your savings. And so Ian's question was, can you quantify the savings? Have you been back and looked at the savings, and what's the value gained? And then Mikhail's question, which was very similar, and was more putting a time limit on that. I don't know whether you can share something around the ROI and the time it took.
Yeah, so in terms of quantifying, I think it'd be difficult for me to put a number on it. We've certainly saved money with the cloud adoption, though. We've certainly saved money with cloud adoption on business continuity generally, because where we would have had something set up, sat there, 2 servers for everything, sat there 24/7 spinning away. We don't need to do that now with cloud. We're able to spin up on demand. We've got things like failovers in place to multiple regions. And again, that gives us that very, very quick scenario for business continuity. So we've really dealt with that. That's probably halved our costs, if not maybe a third of our costs in terms of infrastructure have gone out the window there. We don't need them. So that's quite quantifiable. In terms of
time savings in terms of processes.
Time savings in terms of processes are massive for us. One of the challenges we always had, and the reason why we weren't able to do things like dynamics and chatbots and new repair services, we weren't able to do them with our old infrastructure because the time to live was too long. Everything would take a lot of time. We had to log all sorts of requests to obviously the third party at the time. They would come back and say, this is not compatible with our infrastructure. We can't do this. We can't do that. And IT was seen as a bit of a blocker. We couldn't get these things across the line. Now, we've only had cloud for 18 months, and we've been really able to deliver some massive changes. All of these projects that I'm talking about, dynamics, chatbots, customer portals, new repair services, they have all been realized within months of the cloud being in place. We couldn't get any of these projects across the line in our old infrastructure yet. Since we've moved, within 6 months, we had all of these projects up and running. So it really goes to show the speed of engagement once we've got a really strong foundation, a strong platform to apply things to.
Rebecca's question here: if you've made some new processes and assumed changes in accountability, did you have to introduce new roles? How's your organisation changed, if at all?
I'd say it's changed quite significantly. Whether we've introduced roles per se, I would probably say within the IT team. So the IT team has probably gone from a sort of service desk, service delivery platform to having, an in-house development team. So we've probably changed the roles there. Within the business, I wouldn't say we've necessarily changed the roles. There's been some changes in the way that they deliver the services, but not necessarily the role itself. I think we've probably empowered people a lot more. So the contact center previously would be the first point of contact, but weren't necessarily the people that could help. Whereas now the customer contact center are a lot more empowered to take people through those processes and really help deliver some of the solutions to customers. So that increases that customer satisfaction at the first point of contact.
Last question based on time. So from James here, can you please say a bit more about the migration process from legacy systems? When old and new systems overlap, which challenge lost you the most amount of sleep?
Data, massive challenge around data. Our data, like everybody's, was messy. We had all sorts of conflicting information. We took an amnesty on some data. So we, as an organization, we made decisions around data to remove some data because it just wasn't good enough and start again. And that's a difficult decision to make, a very difficult decision to make. But in the long run, it's a better decision. Some of that data is so old, so out of date. you wonder why we're still holding it. And those challenges are still there. You know, we still have those conversations sometimes about data that, you know, why are we holding on to that data? GDPR was a massive bonus for us, because we basically use that to drive through some of the really tough decisions around data. You know, why are we holding that? Because we were challenging that and querying that question, and it was so it was so in the public domain, GDPR, and the focus on fines and all those kind of things, that really helped us with driving that agenda to clean up that data and really get teams to explain why are you holding that data.
Shall I go one more question, or are you? Everybody's still here, so let's go one more question. So, complaints handling module.
Yes.
It's not really a module, as we know. You're customizing the product in line with your business process. I think the question was, did you do lots and lots of coding, or did you, as much as possible, stay out of the box?
We did as much as possible out of the box. There were some things we still had to code. There were, you know, a few JavaScripts we've had to insert.
That's not code, that's JavaScript.
We've got a lot of coding behind the chatbot as well, so there is quite a lot of coding around that. And that's one of the risks we took. That's one of the things we took on as a business. We realized that by doing some of this, we would create ourselves this internal burden where we would need to develop that out. But again, it's, you know, we use industry standard codes and things like that. It's well documented, it's annotated, and that very much enables us to bring more resources in as and when necessary. But yeah, we try to stay out of the box as much as possible, and Microsoft is certainly getting better at enabling us to do that. So there's been times when we're able to we've been able to take some of that code out, some of that custom code out, and say, right, we don't need that now. We can go with the core product. So we're constantly changing as Microsoft innovates. We're constantly looking at our situation and revising those processes. But what I will say is, you know, if you invest in this, this is an investment for many, many years to come. It's not static. It's something you've got to work on over a number of years.
Certainly a journey, right?
Definitely a journey, yeah.
So there we go. I think we're running out of time. I don't want to keep you any longer, Chris. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak and answer the questions. I know Mikhail's trying to get a last cheeky question in, but I'm gonna pick that up with him later on anyway. So thanks very much, Chris. I hope everybody's enjoyed the session. Very informative. That's been fantastic. If you need any more information, please contact your A&S account manager. There's some great videos on YouTube. Complaints process is one as an example. And I'm sure one of our guys will be following up to get your feedback. But once again, Chris, thanks very much for your help. And I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Bye now.